You know, that episode of Bunny of Seville is a great Looney Tunes episode. What's going on, Timbers family? This is Kyle from Focus Physical Therapy. Just here to talk about getting prepared for this upcoming season. And as you know, it's been a very difficult year, very strange year. So I just want to talk about a few keys, things to look for, screen yourself, a lot of different things that we see in the clinic. And so as we're going through this, I just want you to kind of be honest with yourself and think about how much you've really prepared for this season coming up. You know, this isn't necessarily an exam or a test or quiz that you can just kind of wing and go for it. For your own health, we really want you to be thinking, if you're going to be competitive in these sports, you want to think like a professional athlete, in the sense that you're always keeping your body tuned, nutritionally, physically, mentally, getting yourself properly prepared for the upcoming season. And that really goes for stamina, that goes for strength, agility, and we're going to talk about a lot of different screens and techniques that you can look at really to hone into and have some eyes on to really just get a better idea of how prepared your body really is and how safe you're going to be for this upcoming season. So we're going to look at 3 key movements. We're going to give you 3 ideas, 3 key things to look for as far as deficits that we see, things that you want to note for yourself. And so what we'll look at here to start is going to be a generic squat stance. So I'm going to have Peter here form that. And the things that we want to look at on this is, as he comes down again, the main thing we want to see from the front, we want to see the knee width there. So if we're seeing diving in of the knees, Peter, going to show us what that would look like. We don't want to see that. We want to see nice wide knees. We'll talk about how we can utilize these glute muscles to keep those knees in the proper position. The other thing we want to look at is the forward progression of his trunk here. So if he's leaning way over and his chest isn't out, we're going to put a lot more stress through the back, and that can be a sign of a lot of other limitations, deficits that we might be able to address for you. So the last thing we're going to want to look at, and the most common thing we see, is having people's knees way over their toes. And that can be a sign of not utilizing enough glutes. It can be a deficit in the ankles, and it can just be straight up weakness. So we want to look at those 3 aspects as 3 key parts of the movement that will stand out as being potentially leading towards injury and being at higher risk of injury in your sport with dynamic movements. So the progression on that, and the more difficult challenge, would be an overhead squat. So using a dowel or a broomstick at home, you can assess this yourself. So as Peter's going down here, the first thing we might see is the dowel itself coming forward. We might see the upper back flexing forward, bending this way. The other thing we might see, again, as we saw the first time, is the knees coming together. And that can definitely set you up for knee injuries, can be a hip deficit, which can cause back and knee injuries. So taking that a step further, we're going to add a single leg variation, the classic lunge. The things we might see here are, as we're stepping forward, knees potentially way over the toes. We want to keep them fairly neutral. We want to be right over the toes or behind the toes. We want to land on the heel as we're coming forward here, so that that weight doesn't transfer all through the anterior knee. The other thing we'll look at, and the reason he's using this dowel here, is for the upright stance and that forward trunk progression. That can be a sign of deficits in the lumbar spine, can be glute weakness. So these are all things to look for with the lunge. So the last thing that we'll look at today is balance. And for most athletes, balance is not an issue until you're in a more dynamic situation. So we'll start off with just your single leg balance here. So Peter's going to stand on one leg, 90 degrees at the knee, 90 degrees at the hip. So all we would do is time how long he could stand. So far it looks very good. A few things to look for would be trunk lean, collapse of the knee again, collapse of the arch. All this are things that would lead to problems with a more dynamic or faster motion. So the other variation then would be eyes closed. None of us play sports with our eyes closed, but we do rely very much on our vision. So if we take out that visual aspect of it and we're suffering, there are other ways we can work on that. And then how well can you balance on one leg with other movements or perturbations? So with running form, with band exercises added to it, with rotational movements, ball tosses, or leading into an exercise that we really like is that single leg deadlift or a Romanian deadlift. And so how well can he hinge from the hips here without, again, having that knee valgus, your arch collapsing, ankle turning in, or posture alignment too. So all these things that we'll look at and show you proper versus improper ways to do that.